Good evening. Good evening. I'm Larry Souter, and welcome to Stories of Amazing Grace. We're coming to you from Bixter Chapel at the Madison Church of Christ in Madison, Tennessee. Thank you for joining us on the internet and being a part of our live audience. Glad that you're here. And if you are in the Nashville area, come see us at Stories of Amazing Grace right here, Bixter Chapel, Madison Church of Christ, 6:30 p.m. on the first Wednesday of each month. Love to have you. Well, our theme scripture comes from Romans 8:38 through 39. I am sure that nothing can separate us from God's love, not life or death, not angels or spirits, not the present or the future, and not powers above or powers below. Nothing in all creation can separate us from God's love for us in Christ Jesus our Lord. Tonight's story of Amazing Grace is a two-pronged story of Amazing Grace. My guest is Andy Baker, the president and CEO of World Christian Broadcasting. I've known Andy for around 20 years through my association with World Christian, but did not know that he had a passion for hospice care. So we're going to talk about not only World Christian Broadcasting and the freedoms we have in America, but also the importance of hospice. Watch this short video about World Christian, and then you'll meet Andy Baker.
In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters.
It covers 3/4 of the earth. Water not only fascinates us, it provides us the very source of life, whether in abundance or not. For some on our planet, this precious resource is hard to get. And when abundant water is provided to people who've had to walk miles to get it, it's a big deal. In Madagascar, World Christian Broadcasting partnered with Healing Hands International to drill water wells, and the people rejoiced. Yes, water has always been recognized as necessary to sustain life in the here and now. And since the time of Jesus, water has represented the means to gain life in the hereafter.
Just as technology is used to bring fresh water to thirsty people, technology is also used to send out the living water to those who thirst for hope in this life and the life to come. We deliver the message of hope from two high-powered transmitting stations, one at KNLS in Alaska, which in 2023 celebrates 40 years of broadcasting, and one in Madagascar that went on the air Easter Sunday, 2016.
Broadcasting from the top of the world, Alaska, and from the Indian Ocean region, this is your new life station.
Please make welcome Andy Baker. Come on up. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Larry.
Have a seat.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, glad that you could be with us tonight. Living water. We need water for our physical bodies. Mm-hmm. We need living water for our spiritual bodies. How does World Christian Broadcasting supply living water?
Jesus talked about living water making a difference in this life and in the life to come. We're able to broadcast literally to the entire world. Our broadcasts, we've heard from listeners in every known country of the world. The freedom that we enjoy here in America, I really got a real taste of how important that is recently. I got to travel to South Korea and work with our team we have there. We just began broadcasting into North Korea January 1st of this year. And I spent some time with our staff there. They're doing an amazing job. But I stood in the demilitarized zone of North and South Korea. And I saw on this side, South Korea, freedom, able to worship. And I saw in North Korea, a dark country. In North Korea, if you want to find out about Jesus and you try to use the internet, the government can trace that to your front door and you're in big trouble. If you try to use your cell phone, the government can trace that to your front door and you're in big trouble. Take a wild guess what the government cannot trace. Shortwave radio. So therefore it could be our programming into North Korea could be one of the safest ways to get the gospel into North Korea. So I got a real taste this month visiting South Korea and really standing in the DMZ and really sensing the struggle between North and South and the freedoms that we get to enjoy to tell the story about Jesus. It was amazing.
And this
amazing
is in
trip.
their language.
Yes, yes.
In the Korean language.
In the Korean language, yes. Sane, who we use as our main guy there, he's been broadcasting for 15 years. He's baptized 7,000 people in his personal ministry. And now he's a part of our team at World Christian Broadcasting every day, 2 hours every day, all over North Korea. I visited a few weeks ago with the president of Transworld Radio. He was tickled about our broadcasting into North Korea. And he said, that's interesting. I was able to get 2,500 shortwave radios into North Korea recently. And I said, how did you do that? And he said, you don't want to know. So I didn't ask any further than that. But visiting there, I've really sensed a country at war. On both sides of the river, they're poised, they're ready, fingers on the trigger. If somebody pulls something sneaky, both sides, I mean, you could tell it. South Korea, though, they live in freedom. They enjoy their life. It's clean, it's safe. You ladies would enjoy the fact that in South Korea, they respect women. There are places in parking garages that are painted pink, and they are saved for women to park.
Really?
Ladies can walk after dark and not be afraid. There's no homeless. I rode on the subway. It was clean. In fact, they had a bench in the compartment we entered for old people. So I got to sit down on the bench as we went through a clean subway for a while.
But you're going to say you refused to sit on that bench.
No, I enjoyed it. I for sure enjoyed it.
Well, what is the biggest challenge you have in being president of World Christian? I would say it's raising money. Is that it?
Well, it's a part of that, and it's always the daily issue to do that. One of the challenges that I feel is motivating and encouraging our staff. Our 8 guys who do the programming in 8 different languages, they produce an hour block of programming every day.
What are those languages?
See if I can name them.
Yeah.
English, Chinese, and Russian, Spanish, Portuguese, Arabic, English for Africa,
That's right.
and Korean. One of the challenges I face is encouraging those guys. They study what's going on in the areas of the world that get their programming, and then they'll plan programs to meet those needs. For example, Constantine, broadcasting to a Russian audience, they were raised in an atheistic society. So therefore, we were heavy in programs about existence of God, archaeology that would prove God's existence, because that's what they need. We don't have to convince Africans there's a God. They believe in 25 gods, so it's a different type of a program. So one of the challenges I face is encouraging and motivating those 8 guys, and then the support staff in Alaska and Madagascar that puts the programs out. That's probably a challenge that I feel every day, to keep them motivated and encouraged to do their work. And they're doing great work, and they do it every day. It's amazing.
Let's show a picture of an antenna in Alaska. The tower structure is what supports something else.
Yes. The towers hold up the curtain antenna. The tower is not the antenna. The towers are holding up the antenna. You see the 2 towers on the right are painted, and this one is not painted, but we have to light it. You either got to paint it or light it. So when we built this one in 1983, we decided to paint it. The towers are 365 feet tall, 385 feet across. What you're looking at is, if you laid that structure down on the ground, it would cover 6 acres of ground. That's how large those antennas are. Standing up when they're on, and they just went off the air just a short time ago. 3 o'clock in the morning, our time, both antennas are turned on, because that's prime time in Russia and China. When these antennas are on, they're putting out 32 million watts of power. You can stand in front of these antennas, hold a fluorescent bulb in your hand, and that bulb will glow. We're not sure what it does to your heart, but it'll make a light bulb glow. So from these 2 antennas, we've heard from listeners the entire world. Interesting story about the tower that we decided to light instead of paint it. I had a phone call from Alaska from a neighbor who said, your lights are keeping me awake at night. I said, we can solve that with a $10,000 contribution, because that's how much it costs to paint a tower. His conclusion was, I think I'll just go to Walmart and buy thicker blinds. That's how he solved that problem.
Now, you have the same antenna array in Madagascar as well?
In Madagascar, we've got a third antenna. So we got 6 acres of wire hanging up in the air in Alaska, and we've got 9 acres of wire hanging up in Madagascar.
And from these 2 points, you're covering the whole world?
The whole world. We've heard from listeners in every country of the world. It's amazing technology. It's old technology. World War II ended. Roosevelt was going to go to the Yalta Conference. Back at that time, you couldn't communicate on the other side of the globe. You could communicate straight line, but not on the other side. He commissioned a second lieutenant to come up with a tool whereby they could broadcast him when he was at the Yalta Conference. The second lieutenant was Brother Maurice Hall. And I'm sure a few in this audience and for sure listening know who Brother Maurice was. He was that second lieutenant. At the end of the war, he said, wait a minute. If we can take Roosevelt's voice, we can preach the gospel to the whole world. His dream came true 37 years later. He died 3 days after he was 99, his birthday, at 99 years old. His mind was still sharp to realize his dream had really come true. The antennas are amazing. This is really what an antenna looks like. It's really a two-sided thing, and you don't move it. That structure doesn't move, but you can skew the signal 15 degrees 4 times in each direction. So I'm in Russia, I'm in another part of Russia, and now I'm in China. It's old technology. But there are 3 billion shortwave radios in the world. If we ask this audience how many have a shortwave radio, there might be 4 or 5 hands. But outside America, everybody's got a shortwave radio. So if everybody's got a shortwave radio, and like in China, when Mao Zedong gave everybody a shortwave radio, and then passed a law that everybody that went through the school system would learn one language, in China, everybody's got a shortwave radio. Everybody knows one translation. We can preach the gospel all over China every day.
Well, tell me about the programming. Is it straight preaching? Is it?
No, we feel like that people in the world, their attention span's a lot like ours in America. So we don't do 30-minute, hour-long sermons. We do an hour block of programming every day, but it's 3 to 8 minutes in length programs. Of the hour block, we want 45 minutes of it to be religious. The other 15 is to get you to trust, to develop a friendship. We call it a magazine type format. You go to a doctor's office, get a magazine, one topic, another topic, another topic. And that's how we do our broadcasting really all over the world. That 15 minutes, let me back up and say, we're not a bebop radio station, but we're not opposed to playing a carefully chosen song that's popular in your country. Well, Andy, why would you do that? Your children, for sure your grandchildren, would listen to that. They might not be looking for the Lord, but they'll hear that song, and right after that, they're going to hear a story about Jesus. They're going to hear an a cappella song. They're going to have the Bible being read. So it's a magazine-type format. It's our goal with that 15 minutes to do programs of your interest. For example, we might do a 3 to 5 minute program into Africa about malaria. Well, why would you do that? Because that's an issue there. We might do a 3 to 5 minute program about AIDS, because that's an issue there. So we want to, in that 15 minutes, which is scattered throughout the hour, we're trying to develop a trust relationship, a friendship. We're the only here to tell people about Jesus. And the way we're doing it, the world likes. We've gotten responses. Let me tell you about one response. Before the wall came down in Russia, we weren't getting a peep out of Russia. Nothing. We began to wonder, is anybody listening? The wall comes down. Over the next 30 days, we got 40,000 letters. And they all said the same thing. We've been listening to you for years. We've been afraid to write to you because it's against the law to listen to Christian radio. So now we've heard from the entire world. 3 billion shortwave radios out there. A billion are always on with an average audience of 3. It's the way to reach the world. Unless you live in a large city, and someone says, do you have a shortwave radio? Well, I don't know. If you've got a radio, it's a shortwave radio because that's all that you've got, unless you live in the larger cities that might put out an AM or an FM signal.
We're going to move to hospice in a little bit. I want to see if you have any questions before we do that. So while Anthony is coming to you, let's show a slide here of the 1040 region. Explain this to me.
Okay. 40-degree north latitude, 10-degree south latitude. 97% of the world's unchurched live between the two red lines. That answers, Andy, why would you go to Madagascar and build an $11 million station? Because that's the perfect place you need to be to get a message of hope into the 1040 region. That's the 1040 region where 97% of the world's unchurched live. You see off the coast of Africa is where Madagascar is. We can get a good strong signal, therefore, into the Middle East. We can broadcast all over Africa. And the neat thing about shortwave, we can bounce the signal on the water, bounce it over Africa, and blanket South America. So that's why we added Spanish and Portuguese. So that this region is really important because of the need of these people needing to hear the good news about Jesus.
Questions?
Do the governments, say China and Russia, are they aware of what you are doing? And
Yes.
What is their response to this?
Russia, before the wall came down, and China still does it, they'll jam our signal, which means they'll find our frequency, send in loud noise or loud static to drown out the signal. And when that happens, how should we feel? We feel really good because that means we're saying something worth being blocked. Well, Andy, what do? You change frequencies and keep right on broadcasting. It's kind of like here in Nashville, if we want to listen to CBS, we'll turn to Channel 5. We go to Louisville, Kentucky, CBS is not Channel 5. But a listener in Louisville would start at 5 because that's what we might be used to, and would look right above or right below and find CBS on the station. So a shortwave listener knows that's going to happen. And when it gets jammed, we giggle. It's difficult to do, but Russia did it before the wall came down. China still does it. In fact, our Chinese department last year completed a project of reading the entire Bible in Chinese, and they recorded it in Chinese. And we were sending it into China. The government has blocked that from getting into the Chinese people that live in China. People that don't live in China can pick that up. They've not jammed our regular daily programming. They've not jammed our website. But they do it, and we giggle when that happens because that means we're saying something worth being blocked. And we have monitors throughout the world that their job is to listen to the daily broadcast, to see if it's being blocked or to see how strong the signal is.
You sent me some pictures of a boy drinking water in a water well.
Yeah.
What's this got to do with World Christian?
In southern Madagascar, we've been residents in Madagascar building the station there for a dozen years. We wanted to be good neighbors. In South Madagascar, the children, you can see what he's drinking. They're having extreme drought and famine. And the children to stay alive are eating cactus leaves. So we decided we wanted to do something to help South Madagascar. So we went last year, we had a walk for water. We raised some funds to build 3 water wells. Well, the Lord multiplied that. Those 3 became 45.
Really?
God's story, totally. Well, how did that happen? People began to see what we're doing, and we had people that were living in villages, and they were going back out to water wells that had fallen in and had quit working. So not all of those are all brand new, but we went to build 3, and we built the 3. And this is a picture of the rejoicing. And you saw in the video earlier the rejoicing that they had of having real water that was clean. Interesting story. There was a lady that we gave her a cup of water in a clear glass, and she could see through it. And she said, I refuse to drink that. I refuse to drink a liquid that I can see through.
Really?
She'd never had a liquid that she could see through like that. But that's amazing to hear her say, I can't drink that. I can see through it. So we're going to build some more water wells this coming year. And that's a good picture of boys celebrating.
And we have a shot here of a garden. Do you also...
They were using some of the water to bless their plants. Yeah.
Okay, That's what that's all about.
Yeah.
How big a piece of property does World Christian own over there with Madagascar World Voice?
We were given 84 acres of land by the president. Well, how did that happen? It's a God story. It's the Esther story. He was elected president just for such a time as that. We were able to get most of our things in there and build the station and get it turned on. He was the president, good guy of Madagascar. And during that time, he helped us get everything going in Madagascar. 2 years later, there was a coup, and he was ousted from his position. So he was there just for such a time as this. He has been allowed to come back to the country. We understand that he is able to get his businesses back. And we were told he was even given his money back. He was a millionaire before he became president. He had a water and yogurt bottling company. Highly respected. Good guy. When I was there last, I found out that his wife was mayor of the capital city. Go figure. They're having elections in this coming November, December. We're a little concerned about the elections. The president now is communist. He's being ruled by France. He is removing from office, I'll just put it that way. He is removing from office anybody that he thinks will not support him in the coming elections. So we're a little concerned. We are a 12-hour drive from the capital city. So we're not up there waving a lot of flags. We're just up there doing our work, paying our fees, paying our tax they come up with, get along great with our community. We've got a territorial chief that is kind of over us, and we do things for him. We have rebuilt a school. We've dug some water wells in northern Madagascar. We have helped with, we don't have a lot of heavy equipment there, but we have more than they have, so we've helped with some irrigation issues. Tried to be good neighbors. The Army, we fix their trucks. They provide us security. Works real well.
Good.
So we're glad to be in the northern part of Madagascar. If you want to go to Google Earth and go to Majunga, you can see those antennas. It's kind of neat to see those antennas by Google Earth. Kind of neat.
Is there a fear that the terrorist could do that also?
Yes. We feel pretty safe, but it's a reality that we face every day. So we don't want to take for granted any day of broadcasting. We're just glad to be there. It's the perfect place to be. We visited Mauritius Islands, we visited Seychelles, but that government just didn't work out. This one did. So we're going to broadcast as long as the Lord wants us to, and do it with confidence and courage. We feel good about being there. We really do.
Anybody else?
What language do they speak in Madagascar?
It's called Malagasy. It's got a lot of French in it. If you know French, you could get along pretty well with the Madagascar people.
Also, do you plan to use Japanese or broadcast in Japanese language?
Early on, 20 years ago, like 40 years ago, we had Japanese programming, but the letters and correspondence that we were getting was in English. So the powers that be at that time made a decision just to send the English broadcast into Japan. One of the things we're wondering about is, what's our next language? I'd like your input. Not maybe now, but to give that some prayerful thought. We don't have to build any more antennas. We've got the whole world covered with those antennas. So what would be the next language that we might need to add? That's the question we're pondering this year. So would you pray with us about that, about what language we might add next?
Has ever been any thought to have programming for America?
Yes.
We need some help here, too.
In fact, we have a lot of listeners in America. There's a way that you can listen to our programming on the internet, and we have a lot of listeners, mostly Spanish, several Portuguese, but we have some listeners in America, have a lot of listeners in America. But we've been asked about that. The uniqueness of World Christian is to take the gospel where missionaries can't go, or where we don't have enough.
So you'd have to change your mission statement.
We'd have to change our mission statement.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Let's move on to hospice. You know Buddy Reagan. Mm-hmm. He was a board member at World Christian, my boss at Christian Productions for a while.
And being on the board, he was my boss too, being on the board.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
So he was the boss for both of us.
Yes.
He had cancer and other life-threatening ailments. Before his death almost 2 years ago, a healthcare professional said he could take chemo for his cancer, and this was his response.
She said, you have a choice. You can live a quality life for as long as it is, or you can live a life that would be longer than your quality life selection, but it would be miserable. I said, you've answered my question. No, God answered my question. I said, Lord, it's in your timing. I'll take quality. God loves me. And I love the Lord. And I'm telling you, I'm at peace with this whole thing.
Throughout that dying process, Buddy chose life. Is that what hospice is all about?
Yeah.
Choices?
Hospice is not about dying. It's about living. People do die when they go to hospice. It's not a death warrant, because hospice serves those folks who have an illness that's going to win. The attending physician says this person has an illness that's going to win. And if this disease continues as it should, will have about 6 months left to live. In Danville, Kentucky, I operated a 4-county hospice program. So the uniqueness of that was that as I was the director of the program, in November of 1989, Dr. Paul DeLuca said I had melanoma cancer. It's not a good cancer to have. I was fortunate that we caught it really, really early, but I would go to work every day with a support group, with my staff being my support group. Hospice is about living. They help you live when you've got something going on in your life, that if it continues as it should, you've got a limited time to live. But if you many folks get off of hospice. They stabilize, the illness does. They don't need hospice. But hospice is there to provide a team approach of taking care of you. It's going to give you a different set of eyes to look at your situation. You've got a doctor, you've got a nurse, you've got a social worker, you've got a chaplain, you've got someone that can come into your home to help with a meal or a bath. So it's a team approach of taking care of folks. It wasn't very long when I was directing the program that I found out that nurses view things differently than social workers do. It's not bad, it's just a different view. So when you have an illness that's going to probably take your life, you got that person's issues, but then you got all the families and friends' issues. Everybody does grief differently. And you got all the dynamics that's being played. So hospice care is a team approach of taking care of folks. Their goal is to keep you at home. Most folks want to be at home when they pass. Hospice helps you do that. It helps you live, but it also helps you die. Do an exercise with me. Close your eyes. Close your eyes. It's your time to die. Answer out. Do not answer out loud. How old are you? It's your time to die. How old are you? It's your time to die. Where are you? It's your time to die. Who's with you? It's your time to die. What do you hear? What do you smell? One friend told me, I smell my mother's cooking cornbread in the kitchen. I have a friend that said, I want to pass sitting on a dock overlooking the ocean, drinking a martini, listening to Bach. Open your eyes now. If we had the time to hear your responses, they would be all over the board of how old you were in your thinking. I personally want to go out with good breath.
We all do.
Yes. If you're near me when I die, you put a cert in my mouth. Now go ahead and giggle, but if that is really what I wanted to have happen at the end of my life, what would you lovingly do at my death? Somebody say that out loud. You'd get it. I have a friend in Kentucky who was in several support groups that I led. He heard me say that. To this day, if he walked in the door right tonight, he would hand me a cert. He keeps the cert handy for me. The hospice helps you deal with all of that. It helps you die the way you want to die. And the illustration that I gave you, you need to do that a couple times a year. You might want, in your thinking, I might want children with me, or I don't want anybody with me. You may want to be listening to Bach. You might want to be on a beach somewhere drinking a martini, listening to Bach. But hospice, whatever your wishes are, they really try to comply with that. We served a patient one time. He was 80. The social worker on a visit one day said, "Is there anything you ever wanted to do that you never got to do?" He said, "I've always wanted to ride in a hot air balloon." Well, the social worker got on the phone, made an arrangement, brought that basket to our office. We went and got that guy, put him in that basket. He rode around the city where he lived all his life for an hour. So hospice helps you do stuff like that. It's a neat organization. It made a world of difference in my life, especially when I had that as well. Hospice helps you realize where you need to be when you're in the presence of someone who's about to pass. 4 different areas you might need to be in. This is important. You might need to be right up there next to the bed, right next to the person that's dying, because you've earned the right. Andy, how do you know if that's where you need to be? They'll tell you. You'll know that because you've earned the right through the friendship you've developed to be right there. Or you might need to be in that second layer, not right up there with the patient, but around here, kind of offering support to the family members, to the people that's important, that's sitting in that first row. So your role might be to get in that second row. Or you might need to be in that third row, standing way back, going and getting a cool cloth, going and get a cup of water, making a phone call maybe to someone who they want to have contacted. Or you may be in the kitchen, brewing the coffee, getting the cloth that is cool. You might be in that outer circle. Hospice helps you realize where you need to be as you care for your loved ones. And just by listening and by watching, you'll know which circle to be in. And I give you this advice. When someone passes, hang around, hug them if it's appropriate, and hush. There are no magic words. People have said things at the casket that they meant well. Some of you have probably heard some of those phrases. They mean well, but it's just not the right thing to say. So hang around those folks. They might need a cup of cold water. They might need a cool cloth. Hang around. Hug them, it's appropriate. Does everybody want to be hugged? Not everybody. That's why you need a hug if it's appropriate. But then hush. There are no magic words. Being there is what you remember.
Who I am. That exercise, can you go through that? 8 cards describing who I am.
We did an exercise when I spoke in a class here a few weeks ago, and you need to do this about 2 times a year. Get you 8 pieces of paper, 8 small pieces of paper, and put on those write one thing on each one of those pages of who you are. I'm a mother, I'm a husband, I'm a wife, I'm a worker, I'm a walker, I'm a sports fan, I'm a Tennessee volunteer fan, I'm a church member, I'm a Christian. Write down 8 things that you are. And then put those 8 things out in front of you. And then throw away the least important of those 8. Now, what are you going to throw away first? Job goes first. Maybe a hobby. Well, now you're down to 7. Least important of those 7. Wad it up and throw it away. By the time you get down to 5, it's tough. Because now what are you down to? You're down to relationships. Well, I've had people in groups that will use that exercise. They said, I can't throw another one away because I'm down to my children and my grandchildren. The point of that exercise is when someone is in the process of dying, they have to say goodbye to some things they can no longer do. They can't go to the bathroom by themselves anymore. What does that do to their thinking? They think they are a what? You fill in the blank. I am a burden. I am a nuisance. I can no longer go to the bathroom by myself. That affects a lot of different things. They're saying goodbye to that they can no longer do. I can no longer feed myself. What does that do to their self-esteem? So put those 8 cards out in front of you. Take away the least important. And you'll get down to family. And you'll realize, I'm taking care of my mother. And maybe they're in a bad mood. Maybe she's in a bad mood. It could be something happened that day and she lost something that she can no longer do. I had a hospice nurse that served an older gentleman who always cursed her when she would come for a visit. And this happened every time she would make a visit. One day she made a visit, and as she's going to the bedroom door to leave him, he let out several curse words. She did this. She turned around and she said, and named his name. Let's call him Smith. Mr. Smith, I know you're not angry with me. I know you're angry at what's happening to you. But talking like that hurts my feelings. Was she professional? Absolutely. She had that man, and she was patient with that man because daily he's saying goodbye to some things he can no longer do. Can't go to church anymore. Would that impact your life if you couldn't go to church anymore? If you couldn't hold your grandchildren, would that impact your life? So that exercise is really, really good. You need to do it January 1st every year to see what's important to you. And when you get down to those 3 or 4 cards that you hadn't thrown away, look at those cards and ask yourself, is this what gets the majority of my energy and my time? Are these the things that's the most important to me? Give me a little head nodding. Does that make sense? I can see you if you're not nodding your head. Does that make sense? Get those 8 cards. It'll do you good.
Who pays for hospice?
Insurances have hospice as a part. Medicare and Medicaid also can. If you don't have the insurance, Medicare and Medicaid helps as well. Each hospice gets a per diem per day to take care of your loved one. That pays for everything that relates to the illness that's going to take their life. All the pain medication is covered.
This is typically for 6 months.
Typically. It's not an ironclad rule. Many folks get longer life and they get off of hospice. The hospice here in Nashville, they have an inpatient facility. I didn't have one in Kentucky. Several programs have an inpatient. It's not like a hospital. Visiting hours are all day and all night. They want to have that freedom for the families to be able to come and visit their loved ones. They have a kitchenette there that you can come, just move in there with your loved one. Sometimes people will go to a facility like that when they just need a break. Sometimes they'll go and stay for a few days. There are some folks that do not want their loved one to die at home. So an inpatient facility like Alive Hospice has is the very place that person might need to be, just for the way that the family's thinking about things like that.
I saw this on the internet, top 5 regrets of dying from the National Institutes of Health. Number 1, I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. Number 2, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. Mm-hmm. You encounter some of that?
Yeah, we never had anybody that say, I wish I could work a little bit more.
Yeah, right.
Never.
I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings. I wish I'd stayed in touch with my friends. I wish I'd let myself be happier. Mm-hmm. Wow.
Mm-hmm. One thing hospice helps us do also is grieve. And we all grieve differently. There's not a time limit to grieving. My grandmother used to fix a dessert for me on my birthday. A pound of butter, a pound of sugar, a bottle of Karo syrup, and some biscuits. Go ahead, but it tasted really good. She fixed that for me every birthday. After she passed at age 95, it was my birthday, and my daughter fixed me that dish. And I hadn't planned it, I hadn't thought about it, but I started sobbing. Because when I put that first bite in my mouth, what did I remember? My grandmother. And I say that to illustrate, you're going to smell something 6 months after your loved one passes. You're going to smell something that just triggers remembering that loved one. You're going to see something. You're going to hear something. You're going to go to a restaurant. I've seen my dad in 3 or 4 restaurants as I've traveled. Maybe the person had the same lack of hair that my dad had. Old Spice. When I smell Old Spice, I immediately think about my dad. So what I'm trying to communicate is hospice helps you grieve. For a year after your loved one passes, they offer support for grieving to the family. And they do a great job with doing that. So I would recommend when you do loved ones, to plug into that opportunity. It'll make a real difference. I had a dear friend who lost her husband. They were both in their late 70s at the time. And she called me one day and she said, can we talk? So she came to the hospice office and we sat in the little visiting room. And I said, what's up? And she said, I've got a neighbor. It had been 6 months since her husband passed. And she said, I have a neighbor that thinks I ought to be over it by now. And that neighbor thinks I'm crazy. Well, I was good enough friends with her, I could say, well, you are crazy, but not because of grieving. Grieving lasts as long. In fact, grieving can last for a long time, especially when you smell that smell. When you eat your butter rolls, that's what my grandmother called that dish. Or when you go to a place, or when you see something, or when you hear a song. My dad sung bass at church. I hear his voice often when we're singing songs at worship and there's bass parts. But hospice can help you grieve as well. It can help you live. It can help you die. It can help you grieve. It can be your real good friend to you.
Comments?
I don't want to be disrespectful, but there are other hospices besides Alive
Yes.
here in town, and a lot of
Yes.
people don't realize that. And I've had really good experience, and I think Janet has too, with Amedisys.
Yes.
They have been fantastic.
In
And
fact, there are 14 hospices that serve.
right, and see, they're not. Some people won't. TriStar particularly would not mention another kind of hospice besides Alive. But my mother was on hospice for 3 years. I mean, unbelievable.
Yeah.
But got excellent care.
Yes, yes. And I appreciate you mentioning that. There are a lot of good hospice programs around. There really are.
Tell me the laundry story. The laundry.
I came to Nashville to be near my dad during his last few years of his life. And I directed a hospice program here in Nashville. I won't tell you the name. You'll recognize the name probably. But they had a staff already assembled, so I inherited a staff. And I wanted to make a big impression. So I called them all together, and I gave them this speech. It was a great speech. And I said, I want to be the type director that if you need something in the middle of the night, you call me. If we've got some supplies that need to be delivered to a patient that you're serving and you got hung up, call me and I'll do it. It was a great speech. I just volunteered myself to come at any time of the day. It was a great speech. It was just ringing, in the room. About an hour later, my volunteer coordinator came into my office and said, Andy, we have a problem. I said, what's the problem? She said, we have a family down in Murfreesboro that we're serving. The husband has cancer, and they've got 6 children. And the wife can't get out to do washing, and we need someone to go down there and wash their clothes. Well, what's ringing in the office? My speech. Well, I'll go down there. Back my Jeep into the driveway where the family lived, and then I saw the clothes in 12 garbage-sized bags of dirty clothes. I opened up the trunk lid of my Jeep, threw them in there, went to do something I hadn't done since college days, go to wash my clothes. So I get there, and the lady that was over the laundromat, she saw my dilemma. So she's helping me with quarters, and we had about 6 double-load washer machines washing all those clothes. I remember they're stair-step children. So when you wash those clothes, what falls out? Everything out of their pockets. Well, a marble fell out, and I stuck it in my pocket. I wanted to remember them. But here's what I remembered that day that benefited me the most. My daughter was 9 when Dr. Paul DeLuca said I had melanoma cancer. When we got their clothes washed and back in clean bags, I came back to their home, and that's when I saw her. She had the second deepest blue eyes I'd ever looked into. The number one is my daughter. But here she hopped out of the back door. She was just this tall. And I said, well, what's your name? And she told me, and I won't tell it here. But I squatted down and we're eyeball to eyeball. And I said, little farm animals found in the dryer, are those yours? And she said, no, they're my brother's. But it was that moment I looked into her eyes, and whose eyes was I looking into? My daughter's. Because that just could have easily been me. Here's what I learned. It's only by the grace of God that we get to be on the giving end of care and not the receiving end of care. Would anybody agree? That little girl, I looked into my daughter's eyes that moment. I cried all the way back from Murfreesboro. It was a good cry. Yeah, I cried all the way back. It made me realize how special life is and how quickly it can leave. So may that be a blessing to you that it's only by God's grace that we get to be on the giving end of care and not the receiving.
Thank you, Andy, for sharing your story tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, I want to close with a plea Buddy Reagan made when I video recorded him while he was in hospice care. Buddy was a deep man of faith and wanted to leave this message to all who would hear his final words.
Please, hear what I say. Jesus Christ is the Son of God He is our Savior. He came to this earth to give us that opportunity to accept Him as the Son of God and accept Him as our Savior. Please accept Him as your Savior. I want to see you in heaven. And I look forward to seeing you there. May God bless you.
Betty passed from this life 2 months after that message was recorded. Thank you again for sharing your story. And we invite you to share your story with someone this week, your story of amazing grace. And we'll see you next time on Stories of Amazing Grace. Thank you for coming by. See you next month. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you, Larry. Good.